Hello, this is Gray Hughes of Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Please hit that like button for me. That would be fantastic. Today's video is a discussion I had with Ashleigh Banfield of Drop Dead Serious on YouTube. At one point, at the very beginning, she discusses why she moved from News Nation to YouTube, and then we discuss the Nancy Guthrie case. All right? So if you could hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future videos or interviews, that would be great. So let's get started on the video right now. Everybody knows who Ashleigh Banfield is in the true crime world for sure. You just moved from News Nation to just doing YouTube now. Can you explain that a little bit?
Easy one. I've been in TV, Gray, for 38 years, which is a long time. And all of those years have been live. And so I kind of grew up with live television, and I didn't realize how much of a beast it was to feed every day. And when I started doing podcasting, I launched Drop Dead Series 2 years ago and just was building it really slowly. I started to realize, like, doing these two jobs is too much. Which one gives me the ROI for all that, sweat equity? And I came to determine that TV takes 12 hours to build one show, and then it's kind of gone, and somebody else owns it. And I can put those 12 hours to really good use on my podcast episodes, and I can own them, and they're more lucrative. And it seems to be where all of the interest lies these days. People want what they want, and they don't want to have to sit through everything else. And on television, you got to wait through ads, you got to wait through whatever else the TV show is going to offer. And like the old record albums in the 70s, I only wanted one song, but I had to buy the whole album.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays, you get your $1.99, songs. And so this is kind of the same version of that. I think people want what they want when they want it, and they want to have narrowcasting. And so now I'm narrowcasting. I'm giving folks true crime, the stories that they want, on my terms, and it's just far more liberating, and I don't work for the man.
Well, there you go. Well, I think, I really appreciate you coming on here. I think I've been on your podcast at least maybe twice. I don't know if it was part of the News Nation show at the time, but yeah, I think it's totally different when you're on YouTube. You can really dig deep into something when you're doing.
Great. Listen, you and I are probably going to talk for half an hour. When was the last time on television you ever saw that? Everything's edited down. Everything's on a live schedule. I got a countdown in my ear all the time. I got maybe 7 minutes. I think when you were a guest on my show, you probably thought, what the hell just happened? I was on and off in 7 minutes. And by the way, that was the longer interview segment. But I have discovered what you have probably known all along, and that was that sometimes I'm not done with the question that I'm asking. There's a deeper level I want to get to, or there's something they said that didn't make sense. And on television, you just didn't have the luxury to pull on that thread and get to the bare essence of what the important issue was. And all of a sudden, I'm finding that some of my interviews are an hour or an hour 30.
No,
and I don't have that constraint anymore. I can actually get to the point and get to the important stuff, and maybe even find out more along the way, which has been really, really satisfying.
No, I totally agree. There's times where, like, I remember during the Koberger case, I think I was on Court TV many times, and they would just be, okay, and they just kind of keep you to this thing. And I had so much more that would have, I think actually people want to hear that. It's weird how TV doesn't seem to think that people want to get the details.
No, they do. People want the details. You're 100% right. And it's why you're successful at what you do, because you go down that rabbit hole and you get to the answer, but it does take time, and it takes patience, and it takes persistence. And television doesn't offer that luxury, not in a live format anyway. Programs like 60 Minutes, they'll take sometimes months or years to do that one 14-minute segment or 12-minute segment, and they'll have a staff of 30 years. It's crazy.
Wild.
But live television didn't have that kind of luxury, and we did everything on a shoestring. And sometimes we would be coming up to our deadline of 10 p.m. at night, we still wouldn't have a guest booked at 8. And you don't have the guest, it means you don't have the content, you don't have the user generated agreements for the material. It was just such a scramble every single day just to get that beast filled on deadline. And in podcasting, as you know, you can actually take the guest when they're available, and you can do the research. And if you're not ready at 10 o'clock, then the episode goes out at midnight, or whatever it is. But there's not that artificial pressure to get the journalism out.
Yeah, I noticed you've put videos out at midnight and they still kick ass in views. I mean, people are really waiting for your videos.
I can't believe it either. But I think a lot of that's story driven. You know, that's not going to be the case all the time, as you know. There are days, and it's no different in news. The Iran war has spiked all the ratings of all the news networks because it's big and it's awful and it's scary and people are curious. But that too will wane. It did in all the wars that I covered as a war correspondent as well. You know, Afghanistan waned, and then Iraq waned, and then Middle East when I was in Israel and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and you name it, Lebanon, and that waned. So people will spike their attention for a big story and then it will wane. And such is the cycle of news, and true crime isn't any different. Some things are very, very, you know, news curious. Gabby Petito, everybody was so news curious about Gabby Petito. Same with the Idaho 4 victims at 1122 King Road. Everybody was so curious. What on earth happened is what everybody said to themselves, and couldn't get the answer, and pulled on every thread until they could find out some form of why that mystery happened. So I think it's the similar story with Nancy Guthrie, and that will abate as well. And then, God forbid, you and I know it, something else is going to happen. It always does.
Yeah. I mean, the Nancy Guthrie case, I think it became so huge because of being the mother of Savannah Guthrie. But in reality, isn't it just an interesting case regardless? Isn't it?
100%. And I do think that early on, Gray, everybody flocked to that story because it's like, my God, what happened to Savannah? We know her. We feel like we know her. But on its own, it would have been, I think, a massive story. And that's because it is a vexing mystery. Who does this? Who did it? Why did they do it? And what happened? And we don't have any of those answers yet. Much like the Idaho 4, when those 4 kids were killed, it wasn't just 4 kids were killed. It was, oh my God, who breaks into a house of innocent kids in the middle of the night and slaughters them in such an evil and heinous and cruel way for no reason? And we still don't have the answer to much of it, which was the why. We know who now, but we didn't in the beginning. And it's why everybody flocked to that story, because we could all see ourselves being victims there, right? When it's targeted and it has nothing to do with us, and we think that happens to people who get into that dangerous, you know, lifestyle or world or business, it doesn't create as much of a mystery for us, right? Many people assume, well, if you're in that world, you made your own bed. If you're dancing with the cartels, you made your own bed. It's never going to happen to me because I don't dance with the cartels. But when it happens to the innocent, who literally were just, members of the flock among us, then we're afraid. Who came from outside the flock and did this to one of us? Because any one of us could be next.
Yeah, I actually compare a lot to the Delphi case a little bit, because you have 2 innocent girls, and then there's this video, a video of a guy, and you'd think, man, okay, we have a video. Maybe we should be able to solve this thing pretty quick. But this guy's wearing a balaclava, gloves, etc. You can't even make him out. So it just has that same feeling, like it might go on for a while and you'll still always just have the video of the guy, what do they call him, porch guy or something now. It's just ridiculous. I don't know,
but don't you feel, Gray, in your bones, because of the work that you do, they're gonna find him. They may not find Nancy.
Yes.
I don't know if they'll find Nancy, but I think they'll find porch guy.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's gonna happen. I thought what we could do is we go over the just quickly go over the timeline again. Remember this? And just talk about the elements there. So, the 532 takes an Uber, she takes an Uber over to Annie's house, right? And then they do whatever they do and all that. And
can I just say something about that though for a second? because there's a lot of people online who are really mean to the Guthrie family about the fact that an 84-year-old woman took an Uber. Who makes their mother do that? Please, can we just be a little more gracious about that? There are all sorts of reasons why Nancy may have taken an Uber over to that home at that time. Many reasons, and no one should cast aspersions unless you know what the circumstances were. And we don't. Somebody might not have been home at the time, and Nancy might have wanted to start dinner early, or Nancy might have wanted to bring something and it was a secret, and don't come and get me because I want to bring it and be a surprise. So many reasons. And by the way, at 84, yes, she was infirm, but she wasn't so infirm that she wasn't able to get out and about. She went out to her church group, So I think people should be a little bit more generous before they attack a family for forcing their elderly mother, to take an Uber at that time of day.
I agree. I mean, I say the same thing on my show, and people have said that exact same thing, and I just go like, who cares? What difference does it make anyway? And not only that, maybe she wanted to be independent. And she didn't feel comfortable driving because of just her condition, maybe. So she wanted to take an Uber over there.
There are lots of reasons why. And again, unless you walk in someone's shoes or know the circumstances, it was a little mean to be saying that was some awful, that was some reason for assigning guilt to someone. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Then we have that 9:48. That's when Tommaso dropped her off at home. And how do you think? And then 9:50, that's the garage door opening at 9:48 and then closing at 9:50. Do you think they got that on that camera? Because apparently there's a camera right above that door to the right. If you're looking at the garage door and you turn to the right, if I show it on a map right here and go around like this is something you'd never see on television, by the way.
It sure isn't. And I'm always amazed when you do it. You're really good you're way better at me than this. I'm always like, look at Greg go. I'm fascinated. Fascinated.
But I think there was a camera right here. If I remember early on, there was a camera on this building, and then there's also one, believe it or not, you literally can see that. See that little nodule sticking out right there?
That's the late one, right? That's the one that they took late. This one off the casita.
And that little brown
one that they found it a week later, or came and took it a week later, or more. Mm-hmm.
And that little
I don't remember the first one though. I don't remember the one that pointed to the garage. You know for sure that was one?
I'm not 100% sure, but I remember early on marking it as a place where I saw a camera there.
Or a light?
There is a light there for sure, but I think there was one up to the right, but I'm not 100% sure, but there's the dark spot there is actually the solar panel, if you can believe that. That's how accurate Google Earth is. Anyway,
I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not 100% sure about the possibility of that garage facing potential camera. I do know it's possible that her garage door, has a keypad that may have logged time. I don't know. Mine doesn't. I don't think. Actually, I really don't even know if mine does. I've got two different garage doors, and I don't know if they log time. I don't know if there might have been a camera on the garage facing towards cars approaching. For whatever reason, they've said they struggled so much with cameras and getting times off of cameras. They sure had that one before they ever had any other camera information. So I tend to go with the garage door mechanism itself probably logged a time, or the door. Well, no, that wouldn't be. I was going to say the door to the house opened and closed, but they seem to know that the garage door went up and the garage door went down in that 2-minute spate.
Yeah. So it could be either on the garage door opener itself or a camera.
But the cameras, again, remember the whole camera story? Early on, the sheriff said on, I believe it was Thursday, day 5, the sheriff said, unfortunately, Nancy didn't have a subscription, so we can't get any information off the cameras. And yet he had this already. He had this timeline already. So I tend to think that any timeline information early on that was given to us, like even on day 1 or 2, did not come from cameras. Cameras came later when suddenly the FBI was able to scratch, literally, that's what they call it, scratch data and times and, information and images and video.
So probably when this came out, this timeline in that press conference with the FBI behind him, they did have some of the camera information, because the garage door shuts at 9:50. Then you sort of picture, Nancy's in her home, getting ready for bed, whatever, probably gets in bed at 11:30. We're just throwing it out there, and then she goes to sleep. And then at 1:47, you see the Ring doorbell camera footage. I think. See, my opinion is when you see him putting the plant on there, that is at 146, 147. It's right around that time. Like
No, we
right.
don't know that.
We don't know that for sure.
TMZ, I think it was, had a source that told them a couple weeks ago that the images you're seeing of Porch Guy mucking about on video, as opposed to a still shot without the gun or the backpack, but the video, TMZ had a source that said that happened at 2:12, but no other sources have said that. So I'm not sure. So we don't know at this point what time those images were recorded, if they were at 147 or 2:12.
I think he was TMZ. I don't mean to, I feel like in that situation, they were trying to make that other surveillance footage of the guy with the 2 backpacks fit a story. And, you know, unfortunately, that's what I believe in this case. And that's why they said that image at the door here is at 2:12 when it
gave him enough time to get
because
8 miles away or whatever.
Right. Because even before, you know, I saw the raw version, and the other host said, hey, should we talk about the 147 time frame? And he goes, oh, don't do that, because that'll confuse people. And it's like, okay, well, that's because it'll confuse people, because now your timeline doesn't work with that guy. But, you know, you see, I think the one footage without the backpack, that probably is a different day, right? But I think
maybe well, you know, Gray, maybe a different day, but maybe just a few hours earlier, which would be a different day. I mean, I don't know, but there's a source that came out, I'm trying to remember who it was that reported it, that said there's an issue with January 11th and January 24th. Brian Enton had that. I think Megyn Kelly had that obviously neighbors have been asked about January 11th, and we all wondered why. And then Brian recently said, it was Brian said January 24th was also an issue for neighbors. Neighbors had been canvassed about January 24th, both of those days, 11th and 24th, falling on Saturdays and Sundays, a week and 2 weeks before Nancy was abducted.
That's so interesting. One of them we can maybe tie to that other image, perhaps, without the backpack. But what's the other one? You know, what made him either the 11th or the 24th? What made them want to look at that date? Because we know the one without the backpack. You know, we don't know anything really for sure.
We really don't.
Not, you know, but the thing is, the one without the backpack, if we just assume that was from another day, like the 11th or the 24th, what made them look at the other date? You know, the one that's not that date, because we only have one piece of information. You know? Well,
other than canvassing, stalking, you know, literally casing the place a couple of times to see if there's a pattern. You know how these guys work, right? They usually want to know some pattern if they're good at their jobs. I mean, I can't say if this guy's good at his job or not, if this is his actual profession or his predilection. But, you know, maybe weekends worked for him. Maybe he worked nights somewhere else, and only weekends were available, meaning Saturday nights or Sunday mornings. And his casing was to find out if lights were out and dead asleep by 1 or 2 in the morning. He needed to check a couple of Saturday nights to figure out if that was possible. And it would make perfect sense if he did them in sequence, meaning the 11th, Saturday to Sunday, right? And the 12th, and then the 24th. And those were 2 weekends prior to the 1st.
Yeah, man, it kind of makes you wonder what they have. I picture that, you know, you've seen the street view shots where even if the house has had surveillance cameras, they're not showing anything well at all on the streets. But I imagine if you have a 24-hour, not a motion-activated camera, that they might have been able to pick up lights of a car and maybe little bits of the car where they might know the type it might be, and they can see it moving, and they know that's a vehicle, and they've sort of tracked it the same way, just like
the pattern, right? Yeah, the direction. Here's the problem with that. You know, a lot of people choose different sensitivities, because you have the option on your security camera to choose sensitivities. I want every bit of motion recorded. I want that to click on every time there's even a leaf blowing. Others who live on a corner or have cars going by pretty regularly say, I only want the motion 10 feet from the camera, because I don't need to know how many cars are going by all the time. It just depends on what you select, because you do have that choice in many options. Yeah,
but we were really fortunate in the Idaho 4 case with 1112 King Road. That was a 24/7 just filming camera. It wasn't motion activated. So that was, you know,
That's a lot of data, and not
yeah,
many people choose that, right? That's a lot of data to have 24
huge.
hours of data going at all times.
It's crazy. I don't know. I don't even know. Even back then, I mean, that storage amount's huge.
Hmm.
Let's see. Yeah, so let's get back to the timeline here.
And by the way, I always want to take this opportunity to say two things. 1-800-CALL-FBI if you know anything, right? And you can help find Nancy or find this perpetrator. And the other thing is, please have a subscription. We all know how important that is. Have a subscription. If you've got the cameras, pay for the subscription. There you go, public service.
You heard it. Get a subscription. If you have the cameras, don't let them just record into nothingness.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently that's what happened here, right? I mean, she didn't, the prescription wasn't paid for, a subscription wasn't paid for, and it records, but immediately makes it available to be written over. And apparently they were able to grab little chunks of video that
layers,
you know,
little
yeah,
layers. That's what they call scratching. The FBI and Google work together in a way that apparently the Pima County Sheriff's Homicide Division and their investigators couldn't. I don't know what the FBI did differently with Google in order to get Google's engineers to be able to. They called the actual process scratching the video, and you imagine scratching layers of an onion, and you're trying to get to the layer beneath it, but every so often you scratch a little too hard, and some of the onion below it comes away, and then you don't have it anymore. That's the way it was described to me in any case, and I'm sure it's woefully inadequate, but at least it gets the point across. You can't be perfect.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing, and that's kind of why you want the FBI almost every time. If you're given the opportunity to use the FBI, take it.
Yeah,
in crime cases like this, you just got to do it. So right here we got 147 is the Ring doorbell camera. I think the one where he's holding the plant is right around that time. That's my opinion. And then 212. A different camera. See, that's the thing is people keep claiming out there that it was the front camera that recorded something at 212, but that's impossible because the 147 camera was disconnected at 147, right? So it's already out of play at that point, right?
Well, so I have a few theories about that. I'm still not 100% convinced that there wasn't a Wi-Fi jammer used. And Wi-Fi jammers, as they've been explained to me, they are temporary, right? You jam and things stay jammed for a finite period of time, sometimes upwards of 25 to 30 minutes. So if you look at 147 to 212, that's 25 to 30 minutes. So I'm not 100% sure that 147 isn't a jam. So there's a disconnection maybe that instead reads as a jam. I'm not sure about that. But I also don't know, they haven't told us about which cameras, were incorporated into the plural. My source early on day 3 said cameras, multiple, were smashed. So early on, I knew there were multiple cameras, not just that single doorbell cam in the front. As far as smashed, the sheriff seems to, dismiss a lot of that. I don't know where that came from, he said. He didn't say it didn't happen. He said, I don't know where that came from. And Michael Ruiz of Fox News Digital said that he witnessed shards of glass, not shards, but fragments of glass down below the doorbell, the front doorbell cam. So that it is entirely possible it was smashed off of its bracket. We certainly know it ain't on its bracket now, and the bracket's now finally been taken for testing. But there could have been a jamming and then a walk around to assess where's the best ingress and egress and what do I do here. And this front door is going to be a real pain in the ass because it's got the extra security door on it. So I don't think I'm going to get my way in that way, but I could get my way out that way and take somebody out down this walk to a waiting vehicle, which is the shortest maybe point of carrying somebody without having to go through a gate with a latch and anything else. I'm thinking that could be a possibility. So that time when you see him coming up, it may be that he thought he was still jammed. It may be that he thought he was still off camera. He may at that point have been mucking about like an idiot because he figured he was still jammed and the jamming had already run its course. And he doesn't realize your jammer stopped working 5 minutes ago, and now you're on camera as you attempt to take those cameras away because you're planning to come out through that front door with someone over your shoulder, and you don't want that to be witnessed. So that was the only thing I was thinking about with that front door business. I'm not so sure it's the beginning of his attack. It might be the middle of it where he's planning to now get a body out or get a person out.
Yeah, I actually think a little differently. You got the 147. I think that's when he removed the camera. And my belief is, since he was wearing a balaclava, the gloves and everything, he didn't really care that much that he was on. He knew he was being filmed when he was messing around there. So he didn't really care that much. So I think that he went and removed the camera, or was trying to block it, because he knew he was going to be parking a car right in where the camera's filming. He knew that. So he knew that in a little while, he's going to be taking, I believe 100% that he was going there to take Nancy Guthrie out of the house, get her in the car, and drive away. He just needed to block the view of the car that was going to be pulling up right there. That's what I think.
I just think I agree with you. I just think it happened later at 2:12. I think the business had already gone on around the house, and I think that camera detects movement. May have, in fact, this is an early timeline, by the way. It never got updated once the FBI released its images, right? I just feel like that movement that was detected at 2:12 may, in fact, have been that movement on the front porch. I also don't think that he was trying to cover the camera with those silly little, leaves, because they're not enough to cover.
Yeah,
I
maybe
think
he's trying to pull it
as
off
a vine. Yeah, I think he was using it as a vine. He's got fists as he's holding it, which, by the way, if you're trying to dangle something over, you're using your hands open to get it to, you're not using your fists to try and obscure the camera image. I think he was using the vine to get between the camera and the bracket to yank it. And maybe he tried and finally just smashed it, or it smashed off and fell and broke or whatever. But I don't think he's trying to cover the camera up with the vines, with the flowers. I think he's trying to use the vine.
Well, whatever he was doing there, eventually he removed the camera. But I think that 147 is just when that happened. And what I think he did was he then left the area for about 20 minutes, in my opinion. He walked away and wanted to see if he'd set off any alarms when he removed it. And then he
just watched.
And then he watched from the car. And then from a distance, he drove the car and parked it at like 207. Then he goes around the back of the house and he jumps over the fence, and that camera back there that they removed, remember the one on the roof that we were looking at? That's the one that filmed him at 2:12, just before entering the home. And then he's only in the house for like 15 minutes or so, and then goes out the front door knowing that the camera doesn't work where his car's parked.
Well, there's also the notion that the back spotlights were smashed, right? We saw them dangling and damaged. So I feel like that was done early on. Spotlights were smashed so that he could do whatever business he needed in the back. And I think that the entry to the house was gained through the back door, because my source said two sources now, law enforcement sources, said back door wide open. So I feel like he did something, and I think he did enough in the back to ensure that he could mess around in the back without the spotlight seeing him, right? And I feel like he might have been looking for keys under under a pot or something. The way all people try to look for a key to a back door.
Do you think it's this back door?
Yeah, that's where the lights were smashed.
Yeah, right up here is where the light was smashed.
Right. And to my knowledge, there was no camera back there. I zeroed in as much as I could. I didn't see a bracket. I didn't see anything back there. That's not to say there wasn't a bracket that they actually did remove early in process, because they didn't remove it from the front door for weeks. And it was the FBI's tent, the tent day, I call it, when they put a white tent up on the front door for an hour, and then suddenly the bracket was gone. But I don't know exactly. But I just feel like he made his way in through the back door and decided that getting Nancy out, the shortest method of least resistance would have been down that front pathway where we saw Nancy's blood. I think that Nancy was over his shoulder, and he's carrying his burden that short distance, and she's dropping blood behind him because he's not stepping in the blood as he's walking out to that vehicle.
I think this is where Nancy's room is over here too, because there's
I'm not 100% sure, but it seems that, because there's a porch there, or there's like a little,
little slider.
Yeah, and that's typically what you see in the bedroom.
Right, and in that video, you see of her when she was on, 15 years ago, whatever the heck show that was.
Today Show.
Yeah, Today Show. She was right. You see this window right to her left.
That might be where the bed is parallel to that long wall there at the back.
I think there's a bathroom back here, like must be like a walk-in, like a bathroom there. And then, there's actually 3 photos online of the inside of the home that are really old. Have you ever seen those? I can send them to you. They're pretty.
Yeah, send them. I haven't. I assume because of that little outdoor area, most primary bedrooms have that option for an outdoor area. Not a lot of guest rooms have it. Not a lot of living rooms have it, but primary bedrooms often do have it.
Yeah. So let's see. Let me take a look. I mean, I'm going to throw this picture up on here. This is like the droplets. So I've heard you mention how, like, I agree that it's still, and that she is still, but I think she's absolutely alive here. And I don't agree. This one expert the other day said that these little drops are like satellite drops. From each of these drops, these little drops happen.
I didn't agree with that either.
I think this is expirated. This is like out of the mouth, a cough or something, right?
Yeah. That it looked like that to me. I'm certainly not a blood spatter expert. Henry Lee would be great on this, but what I was most fascinated by is that nothing seems to be stepped in. And my source, also law enforcement source, said that the pattern of blood you're seeing on the front steps is the same as the blood found inside the home, meaning the droplets on the front doorstep are mimicked inside the home. And there's no sign of struggle in them. They were just vertical droplets of blood inside the home as well as outside the home.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think she got, whatever happened, her nose was dripping blood out of her mouth, in my opinion. And it was just dripping. And then I have a different theory out the door. I think that the person was walking, holding her right arm as they're coming out, and they stopped there for a second because he's got to shut the door. And then she's like bent over and coughs, and he just kind of keeps her walking. And the thing is you're not going to step in your own blood drops, because if the blood drops, your foot's moving, so that blood would hit that foot, but a lot of blood will go between and hit the ground on the sides and so forth. And I just think she's made the walk at gunpoint all the way down the path, and they just put her in, and he puts her in the car. Now,
but then that it makes sense, except for coming through the door. You can't walk through the door side by side. And if you have someone at gunpoint, they're not going to be behind you. They're going to be in front of you because they're at gunpoint, right? And so she would have to be walking in front of him with that blood dropping, and he would have to walk through the blood drops, because there would be this period of time where she'd have to be in front of him and the blood would be dropping. Yeah. This is why it drives me crazy that mat is still there, that it wasn't taken and processed early.
It's weird, isn't it? Like, why wouldn't you?
Really weird.
It's crazy. All right, so then we got, 212 is when, I think you probably agree, that's kind of when he enters the home around that time, right? 212. And then 220.
Again, I'm not sure about that. I'm not 100% sure of the time event. Everybody seems to think he's inside the home for 40 minutes. I'm not so sure about that. There could have been all sorts of business going on around the back of the home, like preparing for a crime inside the home, and then an egress outside the home where he didn't want to be seen doing whatever he was doing or taking whatever he was taking. So I tend to think like the light smashing and the camera seeking, and my source says the camera smashing. I think a lot of that happened in those 40 minutes, and I'm not exactly sure how long this perpetrator was in the home.
Yeah, it's weird that they
But I can say something else though about this. Whatever he was doing smashing about outside, and you said, which was a good theory, he took a break to watch and see if any of his activity was registered, and if it alerted someone inside who flicked on a light, who goes there, I think that Nancy couldn't hear anything. You could have smashed on her front door, and I don't think she'd have heard anything, because the New York Times did a piece talking to friends of hers who said she just recently begun wearing high-powered hearing aids. And if you know how hearing aids work, you don't go to bed with them. You take them out, and they're usually on your bedside table or in your bathroom or somewhere, and you're not hearing well, especially when you're asleep. So I think there could have been all sorts of noise, or even if he was trying to test the waters and tickle the wire, as they say, to see if he could find out if somebody was inside the house, or if it was all clear. There's no one in there. I can go in and do what I want, or I can at least go in and get who I want, and they're not awake to know. I think that would have been an easy target because of the hearing aids.
Yeah, that makes sense. And she also probably, took her watch off and has the phone charging right there, and she's just sleeping.
Mm-hmm. As most people do.
And then at 220, I think that it has to be within, they say like 10 to 30 feet, her physical body to the mechanism. I think it's like a device in the home that I think uses then the phone to send a signal or something. I don't really know exactly how it works from
It's just the Bluetooth separation. That's all it is. You get
Right.
far away and you're Bluetooth separate. I mean, if you are upstairs, your AirPods aren't going to connect once you go downstairs, like it's just
Yeah,
too
well,
far.
I was more referring to like the machine that's in the house. I guess there's like
Oh,
a receiver that, she had to be within 10 to 30 feet from it. So if you picture it, like right when you're going out the door, that's about 30 feet away maybe, and that's likely the time because it never connected again after that. So
yeah.
2:28, and they know probably the exact time that the perpetrator confronted her because her heart rate was still recording on the machine and would have spiked dramatically. Don't you think? So they probably know like 2:14 and 38 seconds. They're right.
Yeah, I think they have a lot more information than they're sharing with us, because what does it matter to us? We can't help law enforcement as a crowdsource out here. We can't help them with information like that. The only thing that would do is take away one more tool from them, which is we know something only the killer would know. And so I think they have a lot more information about things that went on inside the house, including where those blood droplets are inside the house. That part, I couldn't get that. All I could get was that they exist, that there are blood droplets inside the house that are exactly the same as they are outside the front, just not where those droplets are.
Yeah. By the way, I wanted to say that, I know you've gotten crap for your, early on when you were saying that you had a source that was talking about the family member. You hear all the people, and I always defend you there because I know that your source is telling you something that's real.
Right. It wasn't my theory. Right.
Yeah, right.
I feel like I have to keep reminding people, like, for those of you, even the New York Times, who, purports to be perfect, says that I asserted that something happened. It's like not even close. I had a law enforcement source that told me a lot of things on day 3, and pretty much all of them have panned out. He told me that they towed the daughter's car. That was true. He told me that the back door was wide open, which a second source confirmed. He told me that there was blood inside the house. Second source confirmed that as well. Told me that the Nest cameras were smashed. Turns out they ended up being Nest cameras, and they were missing. And then there was, glass fragments seen below. And the last thing was that they had their sights set on the brother-in-law. This was what law enforcement was doing, not what Ashleigh was doing. This is what law enforcement was doing.
Sort of proven. You see they have the car. They've got, their law enforcement was in the home taking photos late at night, in the darkness, taking images. And, so obviously they were looking into something. Now, later on, if they clear those people, then they clear those people. But you were just reporting at the time that at that moment, they're looking into him.
Which, Gray, in retrospect, is important because now the sheriff is singing an entirely different tune and saying the tune he's singing today, he's known since day 1. And this is where I think it's important for the public to realize why reporting is important, as opposed to, well, you shouldn't have gotten involved with the investigation. Well, the investigation, it turns out, may have been very misdirected and mistaken, because the sheriff is now saying, I know why that perpetrator was here. And I know, and I've known it since day 1. Yeah. Well, Jesus, you sure said something else.
Now
you said nothing to see here. No one should be worried. Nobody in the neighborhood should be worried. There's no danger out there. But now you're telling us there is a danger. Lock your doors. And I've known about this danger since day 1, and I've known why he was there. Well, then why did you spend so much time on some random ransom seeker? Because you've known since day 1 why he was there. And you don't seem to think it's a ransom issue now. You also told us that we had nothing to worry about back then, but you're very worried about it now, but you've known since day 1. That's why that reporting is important. And it's important to hold law enforcement accountable, because look, as big of a supporter as I am of law enforcement, they do sometimes use us and lie to us. And I'm still willing to help them get eyeballs and tips, but I'm also willing to say, if you're not telling me the truth, I am going to call you out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's also, if you think about it, if he's saying we've always known, then why were you looking into the family members? If you did that, then
precisely
you didn't always know. I mean, you evolved.
Right.
Yeah, he's somebody, I think it was way over his head. I think he gets a little extra, like over the board bashing sometimes, but I agree with, like, he doesn't He's way in over his head. He's contradicted himself many times.
Well, and he's called reporters liars. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things that offended me the most, other than him saying things about me and my reporting as though I was completely off base, and lots of it started to line up from him himself, was when I think it was a Fox News reporter, Jonathan Hunt. I think it was Jonathan Hunt who was in his office sitting across from him and saying, "Can you talk to me about the list of names and photographs that investigators have been taking into gun stores?" And he said, "That's a lie." Well, guess what? As he was saying that's a lie, Brian Enton and others were actually in gun stores talking to the proprietors and workers in the gun stores who were saying they were here. They showed us a list. We typed many of the names in, and sadly, we couldn't match any of the names. So we literally had reporters there at the gun stores talking to these people at the gun stores who were reporting back to us what agents had said when they came into those gun stores. And he's calling Jonathan Hunt basically a liar for asking the question. That's a lie. So yeah, that's offensive. And when law enforcement does that, the gloves are off, because now we're not sure what to trust.
Yeah. Well, there's there's an element of the way he talks that actually helps us too, because he accidentally says things. For example, when he was talking about the camera at 212 that picked up a motion of a person, he said, but at the press conference, he goes, "Yeah, picked up a motion of a person. It could have been an animal, though." And then the FBI agent goes, "Oh, geez," because he knew that he gave away the fact that it's outside now. Why? Because here's the thing: why would you say that it could have been an animal if there was a camera inside?
Right.
So he just, there's things like that. But I'm glad,
Right. And I, because the source that I had said to me, cameras plural, I then wondered, well, we know about the doorbell cam because we could see it. We could see the bracket. But what other cameras is he talking about? And I wondered if it was cameras inside. And he wouldn't confirm anything about cameras inside for a couple of weeks, and then suddenly did confirm that there were cameras inside the home as well.
So there really are cameras inside the home.
He confirmed it.
Because even recently, like, they were talking about 3 cameras, and we know there's one, I guess the third one could be inside and not in front of the garage. But I mean,
possibly.
Is that even a real number? 3 cameras? You heard that recently, though, right?
Well, don't forget, when he was saying cameras plural, didn't know about the camera on the casita because they didn't take it. And I would assume that if they knew about it, they would have taken it. I don't think they'd look at it and say, no biggie. Let's just wrap this homicide investigation up and leave. And that was another thing that I found just really troubling. And that is that day 1 is February 1st. It's a Sunday. Day 2 is February 2nd. It's a Monday. And he holds a news conference and says, search is over. We've wrapped up the crime scene. We're giving it back. And there's nothing to be worried about in the neighborhood here. Now, why would you say all those things? And why would you do all those things if there was something as serious as you're saying on day 44, which is lock your doors? There's a madman out there. That's what makes me so frustrated with the way the sheriff has conducted himself and conducted the investigation. And I think it's important for the Guthrie family to know that as well. And it's really frustrating for me, when I hear people say that Ashleigh thinks this happened with the family. Hell no. I actually think something entirely different. I do believe something entirely different happened. But you had this sheriff whose investigative team was all in on that theory on Tuesday, 3 days after the incident. Now, did they lose valuable time, evidence, and investigative techniques and CSI in those days? Yeah, maybe. And I think it's important for the family to know that as well.
So early on, they seemed to be into the ransom. Even, the FBI seemed to believe that the first 2 letters. But you know what about this case that's always so frustrating is that every theory that you come up with, you got it. There's always that one little thing that
says it can't be. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, it's like, okay, if it was for a ransom, then why'd you send it to TMZ? I mean, because TMZ means he wanted to make it all really exciting and cool and everything. If you were looking for a ransom, you just would have sent it to the appropriate people to get your money,
And by the way, typically, Gray, those ransom requests come with a big, huge headline. Don't tell anyone. Don't involve the police. Don't involve your friends, your family, your neighbors. Don't tell anyone or the guy gets it. That's usually what happens with ransom because it's a secretive business. And I will also say this, ransom for money is a business. It is a serious business. It's cartel stuff, and they don't fuck around. They want their money and they want to get out without a trace. And so the last thing real ransom for business people do is say, let me involve a national network and a few local networks as well. That's just not the way it's done.
They also probably don't try to get a weed to pull off a camera. Let's see. I was going to show you something because I mean, my theory is that it was a I think it is a abduction for ransom that went wrong, and they just said, "Oh my God, forget it." Because as soon as you start sending letters, then they can trace you. That's like my number one theory. Ransom.
That one thing you keep talking about that throws off your theories? The big backpack. I don't think a big stuffed backpack is required to take an 84-year-old
what is
home in the middle of the night. If that's your plan, if your plan is to go in by gunpoint and march her to your car, you don't need any of that stuff. You don't need
unless
any of it.
Maybe he was using some of the stuff in there to like tie her up, or I mean, it's just
you don't even need that. Again, you need it for somebody who's able-bodied and could cause you problems, but you don't need it for an 84-year-old.
So what do you think the backpack's for then?
Well, it's sad. I mean, it's just sad. It's stuff that I've covered in the past. I have an episode on my Drop Dead Serious feed right now about a case involving a woman named Nancy Woodrum. She was older. I wouldn't say, I mean, people got mad at me when I called her geriatric because it's just a term. It's not necessarily an aspersion. She was, I think, 62 or 64. And a contractor who'd been working on her home targeted her, decided that was what he was going to do, and thought that she was nice to him. So he came back in the dark of night and he got his way into her bedroom and he sexually assaulted her and then killed her and put her over his shoulder, wrapped up in her sheets, put her in the back of his painting truck and took her 60 miles away and dumped her in the desert. And most people would say, well, that's impossible. Rapes don't happen with elderly. Oh boy,
a lot of this.
That's misinformed. There is a thing for investigators called geriatric rape, and it's sickening, but it's real. And people do target the elderly for multiple reasons. Number one, predilection, which is sick, but it's true. And 92% of the offenders are in their 20s. Number two, they don't fight back. They're vulnerable, like children. None of us can believe that anybody would assault children in this way either. People are horrible. People are horrible. And they do these things. And so when I look at this just clinically, and it's hard to do that because so many people are afraid to look at this crime clinically because they feel like they know Savannah and it's hurtful to look at the possibilities and sadly, you have to look at the possibilities if you're an investigator. If you don't look at the possibilities, you're derelict in your job. But so many of the things that happened in this crime fit the same MO as what happened to Nancy Woodrum. And if you go and look at that episode of mine, you'll be shocked at the number of similarities, like just one by one, by one, by two, by three. They're just similarity after similarity in that case. And so I think you can't discount that this is just a sick and twisted person who knew the neighborhood, may have worked in that neighborhood as a contractor or whatever, or a delivery person, whatever, and spotted a vulnerable person who lived alone that he could assault and get away with it.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the theories that we come up with on the higher possibility level, because I've covered thousands of cold cases, literally thousands, and then many of them, crazily, I mean, it's weird, just like you were saying, have involved elderly women that have been sexually assaulted by some crazy lunatic. And then just the other night, we went to like newspapers.com and searched for keywords associated with that and found like 10 cases of a woman, being abducted from her home and assaulted and then killed and put somewhere, which is really sad to think about. But again, why?
Talk to the people who do this for a living, right? I mean, you and I cover it for a living, but then there's a whole other element of those who do this for a living. They actually investigate this. They're deep down into the crime scenes themselves. They look at the forensic evidence. They get access to things you and I will never see, thank God. And talk to them as I do. And there are many of them who say that was a kit on his back. That was a kit. That was stuff that you need to do things like that. Maybe a tarp, maybe some restraints, but it wasn't a kit to break in and take someone at gunpoint walking them out of a house. It wasn't a kit to actually effectuate the break-in, because those would have been hardened tools. Those would have been crowbars and hammers and things like that. Not to say that wasn't in that bag, but if you see the bag, it's pretty stuffed full. It's pretty puffy. There's a lot of puffy stuff in that bag as well. And so,
but he intended to take her out of the house, though, right? I mean, he meant to take her. He knew he was going to take her then if he was going to assault her, right?
Yeah, I would say this about the Nancy Woodrum case. The perpetrator, who sang like a canary once he was caught, wouldn't give up a lot of that part of it, but he did kill his victim in the home, and then said, because I had killed her, I had to wrap her up in sheets and take the sheets away. So Nancy Woodrum's bed, this is how it was very different than whatever, I don't know, happened in Nancy Guthrie's home. But the bedding was all taken, and there was a bloodied throw pillow that was left behind with a handprint in it. So they had a lot of evidence. They had male DNA, and they had that blood handprint, and they also had a geofence, which I don't think they have in this particular case. But he would not say his intent was to come sexually assault her and kill her. He just said, while he had sexually assaulted her, he ended up smothering her and killing her that way. But there was a fair bit of blood, not a lot. Like, it wasn't a bloody death. It might have been a punch in the nose and that kind of blood in the Woodrum case. But I don't know. I don't know if the intent of this guy was to do
What year?
that.
What year was that?
Woodrum was, I want to say, about 10 years. Paso Robles. Gosh, I got to think back to the date of the case.
Like, DNA is that, the whole genetic genealogy thing has scared people off. They don't want to leave a body there now. In that case,
that's the problem. Right.
Yeah.
That would tell you that maybe there was some pre-planning to do something really awful and nefarious and then take the body with them. But most people have said, but why would you take the body? You're opening yourself up to a world of hurt. Now you've got the burden of finding a place to get rid of that body in the daylight, because how many more hours of daylight do you have after 2 or 3 a.m. and you're going to drive a certain distance, whatever it is. The guy who did it to Nancy Woodrum was getting rid of the body as sun was coming up.
Yeah. That's I mean, it just sucks to even think about it.
It does. It's awful. But you know what? That's why I say, but for the grace of God, why? I'm so glad I don't have to see some of the things that these investigators see that I've been speaking to at length. But this is what they do when they have to put together possibilities and theories and then see if any evidence matches it.
Did you see this? This is just kind of I'm not saying that's where he parked his car, but pretend that this guy right here, I actually was able to download the 3D model of Google Earth, believe it or not, of the area. But just pretend like this is the guy. He parked off the main street, then he goes around, and then he goes up to the front door over here. I mean, I'm just doing it linear, like he goes up there and let's just say, then he removes the camera. Now he's going to go off site again, because he doesn't know now if cops are going to show up or if anything, anybody was alerted. So then he goes back to the vehicle over here. And then once he gets back,
if cops are coming, he'd have to drive off site at this point. He'd have to.
Yeah. I mean, he even could have driven,
right,
and then just came back later. Maybe maybe that's a police scanner too, right? That he's got. He's just listening.
I never thought of that. Gray, that's really smart. But would the police scanner get reception in this area? I mean, Brian Enton said he couldn't get a cell signal anywhere. And at Nancy Guthrie's home, you really can't get a cell signal. He said at the neighbors' homes, you could get 1 bar. But once you got right at Nancy's home, you couldn't even get 1 bar.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, that's just a theory that people have. But anyways, right here. So here comes this vehicle. Then it drives into the driveway. I didn't put any lights or anything on it. But anyways, it parks right there. Then the individual gets out of the car. It just parks. I just have it parking there for, so this is like 2:07 or so. And then the person gets out, and then maybe he goes around the back of the house over here like this. Maybe before, if I was going to do animation before, he was in the back, he broke the light or something.
Yeah.
Except it seems like that would have picked up the motion at 2:12. I guess we don't know for sure if the camera was inside that got him at 2:12. Then he comes over here and
or by the way, just before you go to the back, maybe he did that business at the front and did the Wi-Fi jammer, knowing he's now got 30 minutes. Go get the car, bring the car in, park it. Maybe he Wi-Fi jammed and knows he's got 25 or so minutes. What that jam's going to stay in place.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I mean, it's so many things that we just don't get to. I wish we were in the investigation itself. We have to back engineer what we here. It's like, so he's in the house, he abducts her, you know, does whatever he's doing, and then he takes her out. You know, some people say she's wrapped up in something or carried over the shoulder, and then get into the car here, and then it just drives away. And the reason he broke that camera was because he was going to be parking there. And
Right.
And for a short amount of time, too. He didn't want to park it there for 40-something minutes. He pulls up there at like 2:10, then goes around the back, and he's already out the door at 2:28.
And he would, I mean, presumably because he's done some casing, that's what we now know to be the case from sourcing, right? That those images are on different days. Then he knows that there are cameras around the back. And you're right. Maybe he doesn't want to pull the vehicle in around the back because perhaps that casita camera would have caught a vehicle around the back. Or maybe he sees in the back that the fence and the gate, which I have not tried myself, I don't know how hard it is to get through that gate, would have been too hard. To get through that gate would have been too hard to carry a body or take a body through. And it would have been just much easier to go out through the front. Therefore, let's do the business, get rid of the camera in the front, then go around the back as just a person, not a car.
Right,
Leave the car out front, never bring the car around the back. I always assumed the car would be around the back because it's out of the way of everybody, but it's so damn dark there.
Yeah.
The car around the front is still out of the way of everybody.
And look at here, like if there is a camera that I thought I saw on that building back there, it can't see a damn thing here. So you would drive in knowing that that's the only camera. He probably did what you were saying, scoped it out, saw there was no other cameras other than the ring or the doorbell camera. And then he parks just right over here. He just parks.
What a lot of planning.
Right there.
What a lot of planning. I mean, you know, the guy in the Woodrum case, he did some planning, not much planning, but he was definitely there and realized his victim and decided to come back. And I'll tell you one thing that he did that just to this day makes my skin crawl. When he decided to come back, he used to step out on his wife a lot. He had a wife and a kid and no other crime. So the CODIS, system didn't help in the Nancy Woodrum case because he hadn't committed a crime. He wasn't uploaded. But he used to step out on his wife a lot and she was quite angry and she'd blow up his phone a lot. And he left her that night with the intent of going to do what he did to Nancy Woodrum. And he stopped at a church and he spent like 20 minutes at this church. And it was like a mall church, the kind of church that's in a mall, like a walk-up mall. And he spent 20 minutes at the church. And what was he doing in those 20 minutes at the church? Was he praying and looking for divine intervention to not do the thing that he was going to do? Because ultimately he left the church and went right to Nancy Woodrum's home and did what he did to her. So it's just like the amount of planning and thinking that these people do. Sometimes it's so impulsive they can't control themselves. And sometimes they take days and weeks to make sure that they commit the perfect crime.
Yeah. Hey, there's one last thing I wanted to, Brian Hinton just came up with reporting. And by the way, somebody on my channel called in like day 2 of this and mentioned that there was this construction going on right here. And that's what they're talking about now. They're actually trying to figure out who was on this crew. And if you go back, look at that. I mean, there's Nancy Guthrie's home and it's just straight up that driveway. And there was this construction going on. If we use the mapping, not the 3D, so if we go back in time here, let me just tell you. So on February of 2024, that's actually, let's see what date that is. Yeah, that's February 2024. There's construction going on there. And I think
2 years ago.
Yeah, not too long ago, really. And
no, 2 years, February 2024.
It is kind of a long time ago.
However, Gray, I will say this, the investigators I've spoken to said, don't think for a minute that someone who's working on a home and spots somebody goes the next day. Sometimes they will wait it out. And the investigator in specific I spoke to said sometimes up to 2 years.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
It's not out of the ordinary that somebody might make a plan and say, I remember 2 years ago, there was a person who lived there by herself.
Yeah. I mean, it could be something like that. I mean, I don't put a lot of, huge amount of weight in the possibility of that, but
I do. And you know what? I'm pissed off to hear that this is happening on day 44. I think that's when Brian had his report. Because I'll tell you what, Gray, I interviewed Sheriff Nanos on February 2nd. Okay. That's Monday. That's Monday after the Sunday when this happened. And do you know what I told him? I said, you should really look at the Nancy Woodrum case. You should look at the Nancy Woodrum case because this looks very similar. And this is only a day. I mean, I'm literally talking to the guy like you and I are talking right now. And I said, look at the Nancy Woodrum case. This was a contractor who worked on the house, who came back and did this. And there's so many similarities, it seems, between these two particular women and their homes and their circumstances. You should look at the Nancy Woodrum case. Now, why weren't they saying, oh, well, there's construction, on the other side of the road 2 years ago with a whole bunch of contractors who'd going right past Nancy's driveway. Why are we starting to ask neighbors about that construction project and those contractors 44 days in? Why?
It's weird too, because I mean, like I said on my channel, we actually looked at this the guy goes, hey, there's construction. We looked right at it. I mean, if you look at the screen right here, look at how on the 3D version, I mean, there's all these people and it's right here. Now they could have watched her and developed a plan.
And again, depending on what the intent was, if it was this awful, similarity to Nancy Woodrum, which was a planned sexual assault, then yeah, you're right. They may have seen the potential, the possibility, the opportunity, the vulnerability, and they may have remembered that. And listen, I don't think that Nancy Woodrum's killer was innocent of any other crimes. I just think he hadn't been caught. I think somebody who does that kind of thing had done it before. And the person maybe who was attacked and lived never reported it, or they were never able to solve it. Whatever it was, I think he'd done it before. I don't think this was first go around. It's pretty serious stuff. So and I wouldn't doubt it in the Guthrie case either.
So you don't think Nancy was removed for being, because of the relationship that her mother is so famous?
No, and I'll tell you why. Look, I can speak from experience. I've been on television for 38 years, and I've had my fair share of stalkers that I've had to seek the help of police. Typically, people who are infatuated with folks who are in the public eye reach out to that person. They have a connection they want to make to that person that goes beyond the lens that they are trapped by, right? And so without any overture at all to Savannah, it would be real weird for someone to be obsessed with Savannah and simply go after her mother, never having reached out to Savannah or been at a point where it was troublesome enough that you're going to diabolically plan to do something horrifying to her mom. Typically, if you're that twisted, you will have made some effort to reach out to the object of your desire beforehand.
That's interesting. I mean, it's weird how this case has evolved, because early on, it seemed like they really were into the abduction for ransom, because remember how Savannah gave those TikTok or not TikTok, Instagram interview, whatever you call those, like little commentary, and she, it seemed like on the second one she was resigned to the fact that her mother wasn't even alive. She basically was saying, and the way I interpret it was, we understand now. And we just want to have her back so that we can celebrate her life with her body here, is how I'm interpreting it. And we don't want to go through years and years of, torment. I think she said peace, that they wouldn't have peace without her body back. And they're willing to pay just for the knowledge of where to locate her. So it seemed like they were down that route where they were at a point where they literally believed she wasn't alive anymore. But now it's sort of like evolved into a whole different thing, maybe, or are they still on the route? I mean,
I just took it to mean that these scammers who saw an opportunity from wherever their little hovel is to pile on to an already horrifying situation for a family and see if they could benefit in some way. I took that to mean that they were using AI. They were doing all sorts of things to make excuses for why they couldn't give proof of life. You know how they work. They'll say anything, they'll do anything. And ultimately, I think that's probably what the family was doing, was trying to appeal. Look, I don't trust what you're sending. I don't know if what you're sending is real. I don't know if the things you're saying or showing or whatever it is real. We're just saying we'll pay, but we have to have the person. Proof of life or not, you got to send us a person, or, we know you're a liar. And I think ultimately, I don't understand why Sheriff Nanos didn't tell them, but I already know. I've known since day one. I have known since day one why the person was there. So you don't need to mess with any of this business. Again, Gray, you see why I'm so frustrated?
Well, no, I get the frustration. There's just been times, I'm saying that there's times where people interpret things that he says a little differently than I think they would if they weren't already pissed off at him. I mean, I get it.
Well, it's
Though.
it's hard to interpret.
Yeah.
I've known since day one
No,
why
not
this
those
guy was
things.
here in any other way than
I'm not
I've
talking about
known what
those
his
things.
motive is, and I've known since day one. Well, then why did you go after the family? Because that's what your investigative team was doing. I know it because I was told, and you behaved that way. Number two, why did you then think it was a ransom? That's a second theory. Now, number three, you think it's a bad guy who's out there and menacing the community, and the community needs to be protected against him. Those are three different things. Which one was it on day one that you've known all along?
No, it's like I said, I think he just wanted to be a sheriff in a little town, and then this huge thing occurred, and he just absolutely is not capable of handling it.
Well, there was also a lot of preferential treatment, I think, that was being displayed by this sheriff. And as sad as it is, when you have an Elizabeth Smart styled disappearance, a vulnerable victim, it's crime fighting 101. You have to look at the family first. And it is so unpleasant, but you have to, because the majority of cases are typically people close to that vulnerable person. So it is the rule. It's not the option. It is the rule that you have to look at these people. And that's why you have to be objective when you do that. You cannot be looking at relatives and family members while at the same time saying things like, this is our, these people are family to us, and she's our first daughter here in Tucson, and this family has been through enough. And you can't say those things while at the same time being investigating them. You shouldn't be saying those things while at the same time investigating them. And as unpleasant as it is, I had to ask Ed Smart and Lois Smart some of the most uncomfortable questions when I was out covering Elizabeth Smart's disappearance for 5 straight weeks. And I remember it broke my heart to ask them those questions. But unfortunately, they're the questions you have to ask if you're doing your job. And so I found it just really this preferential favoritism that the sheriff was showing towards the family. Sure, it was sweet and kind, but it also wasn't what he should have been doing. He should have been doing his job and then clearing them as quickly as he can based on fact, not love, Yeah,
yeah, totally. And what a crazy case that was. I mean, how random was that one? I mean,
well, you know what? The boogeyman does come. The boogeyman does come. I have seen it enough in Polly Klass's case, and Elizabeth Smart's case. I could go on and on. Sometimes a boogeyman does come into the home and take your loved one. And it doesn't look like it's possible. And that's why everybody looks at the family first. But in Nancy Guthrie's case, I think it was a boogeyman for 100%. Like, these awful people exist. And we saw it. We've seen it many times. You just have to go back over decades and decades of true crime cases, and you'll see oftentimes they are the horrifying people who did these things to others.
Yeah. Well, I know I think you have another appointment coming up here pretty soon, but I could sit here and talk to you for 3 more hours.
I'm the same. I love how you think, and I love how you actually like ascribe models to test your theories. You actually do the work, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I think you and Brian Enton have been kind of like the go-to people that I watch to get see what's going on lately.
Well, Michael Ruiz was doing really well. Matt Finn was doing great work out there as well. People screamed about JLR, and I understand, but he was dedicated and he kept that feed going. So when everybody else left because of these monstrous parking restrictions that the sheriff used to shoo the media away, JLR stayed and at least kept an eye on the house and told us what vehicles were showing up and what vehicles weren't. I think he was the one that saw Annie's car had finally been returned after 42 days or something under watch. Was just, again, mystifying for a sheriff who wanted to clear a family. Why'd you keep the car for that long? Because it just caused immeasurable problems for them that were unnecessary.
Yeah, you clear them, but then you have the car for another 3 weeks after you cleared them. That doesn't make any sense.
And you gave back the silver Range Rover within 10 days of the warrant. So these are the things that were mystifying. And someone like JLR was able to at least show that. So, there are a lot of people who work very, very hard to bring that story. And I think we'll continue to, because it's not over yet.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And maybe we'll do it again. I hope we get to do it again on other cases.
I hope so.
Maybe more on this one.
I hope so. Thanks, Gray. I appreciate it.